This is Out of the Box with your host, Jonathan Clark. Out of the Box, Sunday nights at 9 on Q1043.
Okay, Anders Osborne is with us. His new album is Picasso's Villa, on tour now. All the info, andersosborne.com. I want to speak about this great new album, Anders, but I first want to ask you about Uddevalla, Sweden, where you were born. Mm-hmm. Now, where is that in Sweden in relation to the cities that stupid Americans like me know about? You know?
Yeah, it's, I think, about an hour and a half north of Gothenburg. So it'll be on the southwest side of Sweden. Yeah, halfway up to Norway, I think. And
I'm assuming growing up, the radio inundated you with people like, Roxette, ABBA, Ace of Base, the Cardigans, Europe, The Final Countdown. But what led you into this sort of different musical direction?
Well, I think a lot of the music that showed up, it was pretty early on. I would say Black Sabbath, ZZ Top. What else was in there? Kiss when I was younger.
Zeppelin, maybe?
Yeah, Zeppelin, but I was more Sabbath, honestly.
Okay.
Which today surprises me because I'm like, well, Zeppelin's cooler, I think, but there was something about Black Sabbath at that time. But I think the big switch was probably, now we moved from Uddevalla, which is where I was born, and then when I was 7 or 8, we moved to Gotland, which is an island in the Baltic Sea. So I lived there till I was 16 when I left. So that's most of my sort of musical background came on this island.
So from that island in you said the Baltic Sea?
Yeah, so it's basically 5 hours with a ferry from south of Stockholm. You take a ferry, and there's also another place from a South Point, which I can't remember the name of it. It's been over 40 years, but yeah, it's been a minute. But yeah, so that island is stunning. I mean, I've been back. I was back 24 years ago, and it's just amazing. Yeah.
So the age of 16, you moved to New Orleans, or?
I started hitchhiking. I left for 2 years, met a guy in Dubrovnik. So I was, right before I turned 18, I met him, and he lived in New Orleans. And then I ended up going to New Orleans and discovering that I had relatives in Louisiana and stuff.
Oh, okay.
So I ended up staying and fell in love, had a family, and 40 years later, here I am.
Well, talk about music. I mean, you picked the right city. It's either New Orleans or Memphis or Nashville, right? I mean,
or New York.
Or New York and L.A., of course. But
you
tour a lot. I read that on an average year, you sleep in 140 different beds around the world. And I asked Slash recently about this. He said all the traveling, the lack of sleep, the unhealthy diet, it's all worth it for the 2 hours or so that you get to play every night. So live is the reason he does what he does. Is that pretty much the same for you, or do you prefer the studio and things like that?
I prefer studio and songwriting, but I think the live performance has become more and more of a necessity because of the lack of income from airplay.
The world has changed.
Yeah, the streaming and no record sales and all that stuff. So we're kind of forced to. But you figure out a way to, how do I put it? I mean, the 2 hours are great, but I don't focus on it for myself. It's mainly to meet people. So I love making records, writing songs, make a connection. You have a fan connection via email or social media. Then when you go out, you get to meet them, you shake hands. And even if it's just a few hundred people in my crowd, that's the whole reason I'm out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The new album, Picasso's Villa, the album actually has a Picasso-esque sort of album cover.
Yeah.
Talk about the cover of the album first.
Yeah. It's escaping me now, the artist, but it was my previous management had a connection with a guy. So they send it to this guy, and the idea, they know that I'm a painter, I oil on canvas and stuff like that. And so I was thinking, if it's Picasso's Villa, it's a story about basically the clownery of entertainment business, right? And I thought the escape and the Zen place we can all go to is Picasso's Villa. We can just do art for art's sake. So I sent it to him, and he sent this back, and I was like, it was just perfect.
It looks like Picasso.
It's so perfect that I was like, that's amazing. So yeah, it's another guy. It's not stolen or nothing. It's a guy just kind of mimicked the Picasso style, yeah.
It's really cool. And you have some great players on the album with you, including the great Waddy Wachtel.
Yeah.
Does that guy have stories or what?
Oh, goodness. It's amazing. Amazing. All the way from the draft of Vietnam to sessions. Yeah.
And his hair's still the same. I don't know how he does that.
Yeah, I don't know how he does that either.
So talk about working with Waddy.
The first time I did it was on the previous record called Buddha and the Blues. So my drummer and producer, Chad Cromwell, who's also a very, recognized session player, and then Bob Glob on the bass. So these are all the old guard. So my idea was on the previous record to go to California and then record like some of my records that I was influenced by in the early 70s, Jackson Browne and all this stuff. And so they came in, and I remember the first note coming out of Waddy's guitar, and he goes straight in. He has this one Les Paul from the 70s. It's a white one with a preamp and the pickup, and no pedals, no nothing, just straight in. And it's like, I had to stop the session. I go, it sounded just like all the records that I grew up on.
Right.
That's the tone. And I'm like, oh my God, it's just his fingers. Yeah. So it was amazing. Yeah.
Where did you record this? Was it L.A. or is it Nashville?
Picasso's Villa was in New Orleans.
Okay.
But the one before was in Ohio. But yeah, this one, we brought the same team and we went to Esplanade Studios in New Orleans, which is pretty close to my house. Yeah.
All right, cool. Keith Richards discovered the open G tuning. Mm-hmm. You discovered the open D tuning.
I don't know if I discovered, but I discovered.
You were taught it or whatever.
Yeah. I learned it through learning a Joni Mitchell song.
Right.
Yeah, it was reversed, not the blues. It was Joni. I think it was the song Carrie or something.
Yeah.
And then as I tuned it to open D and I started strumming on it, I realized that's Elmore James, that's Robert Johnson, that's like all those old blues cats. And that led me to pick up more of those records. And it was
I'm
wild.
like a horrible guitar player, but I know open tunings. It's just amazing when you have a regular tuning, then you switch it to a different tuning. It's like a whole world opens up.
Unbelievable.
Right?
It's totally beautiful.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
What's the coolest thing you've been able to do? Now, this could be meeting one of your rock and roll idols, maybe recording with them, maybe playing a certain venue. Top of your mind, top of your head, top two things that you've been able to do since the age of 16, doing what you do since then.
Career-wise or in life?
Anything.
I think climbing Mount Olympus.
Wow.
That was pretty cool. And I think, what's another thing that stood out? I mean, the birth of my two kids, to be present for that.
Right. Yeah.
That was pretty amazing. As far as performing, I think touring as a guitar player with Toots and the Maytals was just really what you hope it to be. So I think Toots and the Maytals, when I got the opportunity to tour with Toots, and you're on stage and he opens his mouth, and it's exactly like the records.
Yeah.
And it has the same impact, and it's just, it's like landmark artist. It's before and after.
What a legend.
Unbelievable.
I saw Toots only once. I think it was Irving Plaza here in New York. And you're right. He played for 2 hours. And everything sounded exactly like I heard it on records, growing up.
Yeah.
You know, just unbelievable.
So beautiful.
And what a band. I mean, my God.
Fantastic.
Hey, I want to play To Live from the new album. What can you tell us about this song?
To Live was also, most of these songs were written pretty folky at my house in New Orleans. And so this was basically part of the whole period of this record, which is this, I wouldn't call it existential, but kind of. It's this balance of you spend a certain amount of time just doing the same. So in my case, making music, playing music, being an entertainer, performer, and all this stuff. Then you get to a place where you go, well, this isn't it. There's still this thing missing. And I'm too resentful, and I'm too emotional there, and this is, all these things. So this song is one of the 2 or 3, I think, on the record where I'm trying to organize these thoughts and just be more positive.
Anders Osborne is with us. Everyone go out and get his new album, Picasso's Villa. He's on tour now. Get all the info, AndersOsborne.com. Anders, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jonathan.
This is Out of the Box with your host, Jonathan Clark. Out of the Box, Sunday nights at 9 on Q1043.